thank you, Brother Richard, for sitting down once again for Behind the Final Call cover story. This edition is volume number 38, number 27. The date on the paper, of course, is April 9th, 2019. A sobering story, of course, on the cover of this paper, the life, loss, and legacy of Nipsey Hussle. Beautiful brother, beautiful brother. Can you share, as we always ask, same question, why this cover story?
Well, first of all, assalamu alaikum, Brother Troy. Thank you for having me. Secondly of all, is my hat straight?
Your hat is straight.
Okay, that's got to be clear. You know, unfortunately, with the killing of Nipsey Hussle on March 31st, I think a very traumatic episode, in particular for Black Los Angeles. And for his fans. So this is a brother who grew up the hard way in Los Angeles, but he was working in the neighborhood where he grew up as an entrepreneur. Not only was he an artist, but he was an entrepreneur, and he was working with a partner to redevelop. He literally purchased, or they purchased, literally the same strip mall where he used to be doing stuff in the parking lot. So he looked at being able to reinvest and rebuild in the community where he came up in, where his homies were, and to bring opportunity to others, not just charity, but opportunity, meaning a vibrant business. So he had a clothing store, and there were other ventures. He envisioned redeveloping that area and putting in he and his partner purchased this shopping center, strip mall. And so their plan was to tear it down, rebuild it, redevelop it, do some mixed use development, housing with his business, his clothing, his business, his store, the Marathon shop, really being the anchor tenant. So here was a brother who really was not only a great musical talent, but a great visionary, very beloved by people in LA and other places, across gang lines. He was in that life at one point, but he was pointing toward a different way. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting was he did an interview with the Breakfast Club and Charlemagne the God, and they were having this conversation, and they were talking about kind of his ability to navigate these different worlds and these different people. And Nipsey Hussle talked about, in terms of the rap game, because he was in one street organization, but he collaborated with those who were within other street organizations. And so he talked about taking those allegiances and those identities and bringing gang wars into the rap game was not a good thing. He said, so what he has tried to do, he and others have tried to do intentionally, is to not make everyone feel as though they can only, if you're with this set, you can only choose this rapper. If you're with this set, you can only choose this rapper. But to let people be able to enjoy music and to let the artist benefit. So Charlemagne said, well, how do you translate that down into the streets? So Nipsey said, well, we look at history. And so he talked a little bit about Death Row and what happened with Tupac and what happened to Biggie Smalls, and then the eventual deconstruction of the company, Suge Knight, the CEO and man behind Death Row, going to jail, still in jail. So he said, you can either follow that model, which has led to death, imprisonment, and destruction, or you can follow this other model that we're trying, where you can be successful for yourself, your family, your homies, and your community. So right now, and what we heard was, and what police have said, what other sources have told us, is the belief is that he was killed by someone who was in his inner circle. possibly someone who was thought to be in the street organization, the same street organization, but someone who hadn't been around for a while and who was an informant. And there was in a sense, a kind of confrontation between him and Nipsey Hussle about his alleged work as an informant. And the man walked away, came back, shot Nipsey to death, injured 2 other people. The LAPD have now put out a photo for a young man they are identifying as Eric Holder as the suspected shooter. Very, very tragic in a sense, but in another sense, an opportunity. And one of the things that I say in my actually the whole theme of my editorial, which you should be able to get at finalcall.com. Excuse me. One of the main things is we need to continue the vision of Nipsey Hussle. So, is this project going to die that he had planned? Is his vision going to die for bringing in technology and bridging that gap between those who don't have and those in the inner city with technology? He wanted folks to get involved in things like cryptocurrency. He actually built his own reputation, if you will, as an artist, and built something of following for himself before he took a record deal, and he took the record deal for very explicit purposes. So when you listen to him, and even in his music, there were messages in terms of different subjects that he raised, not just kind of the run-of-the-mill gang life, let's kill each other and go have a drink. So his loss deeply, deeply felt, in particular in Los Angeles, but all around the country, and I would say actually in different parts of the world, since his father was Eritrean and his mother was Black American. His father was here in America where he met his mom, and so there's even that connection. So one of the top level officials in the Eritrean government issued a statement offering their condolences for the loss of life of this young brother. So it's something that we should be aware of. The minister, of course, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, put out a brief statement that's available at finalcall.com, and we've got a beautiful print edition this week, or you can get the digital edition, but there's really nothing like, I think, the print edition with the pictures and the photos and the flow of the story. So get your print edition and just check out the different aspects of brother's life as we talk about him. We have 4 different articles related to him, his music, his contribution, what he represented. Actually, I guess 5 if you count the minister's article as well, or the minister's statement as well. So again, we're trying to bring you the story in its full dimensions. We thank our team for coming together and doing this at the last minute, because this was, of course, a sudden death and unexpected by us, even though Nipsey put out a tweet that seemed to be somewhat prophetic, talking about enemies and made something like major enemies, and them, that being a blessing. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot here yet to unpack, a lot of emotions very high in Los Angeles right now. So we've got our national correspondent, Sister Charlene Muhammad, in LA, who was on the ground, did a very good job this week storytelling from LA. We have Brother Brian 18X that did a piece focusing more on the economic side of Nipsey's work in reaction to folks to that work and his loss. Then another piece by Jihad Muhammad, another contributing writer, dealing with what is Nipsey's place in hip-hop history and what does his words, his life, his message represent. So we got a lot there. We hope that you will take advantage of it. Great pictures, great stories, great design. And we again try to give you the best that we can, and we try to get a little better every week.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Well, I thought it might be good that we can close out, if you don't mind reading the minister's statement as we close out the show. But before we get there, let's kind of jump to page 4 with the article, Mayor and Police Superintendent Accused of Hypocrisy in Smollett's Case.
Well, this is again looking at this case that has exploded, not only in the national media, but believe it or not, in the international media. It has exploded because the state's attorney in Chicago, Kim Foxx,
a black woman,
recused herself from dealing with the case of Jussie Smollett, who was accused of perpetuating a hoax. At the end of the day, with this settlement, or whatever you call it, he forfeited a bond. He did community service at Reverend Jackson's Rainbow Push operation, but there's no admission of guilt. So coming out of the proceeding, where this, I mean, I don't even know what to call it. Where this, well, I guess probably the best thing to say, coming out of court where this case was resolved, right? He again said that he was innocent. So that, of course, has outraged some people in the city, in particular whites and the power structure. So the mayor's been outraged. The black police chief appointed by the white mayor, who's on his way out, and the police chief was likely on his way out, since we'll be having a mayoral election today, right? I guess it's April 2nd. Outrage. White folks outrage. Chicago Police Union, outrage. Well, what's the outrage? The outrage is that you had a black woman who's a state's attorney recused herself and had another lawyer in her office make a decision about how to dispose of a case. Now, these people are almost losing their mind. There was actually a protest yesterday, which was Monday, April 1st, so maybe the protest was appropriate. The Chicago Police Union officers out on the streets protesting against this Sister Kim Foxx, calling for her to resign. Others have called for her to be ousted. Others have called for an investigation. So I'm trying to figure out on what grounds. I'll give you an example about why I think this is so crazy, and it's all about politics, and black folk in this city better understand that. Kim Foxx came into office on the heels of a wave following the revelations and the release of a videotape about the killing of Laquan McDonald, right? That came out a couple years ago. Now, when this tape came out, it shows this young man being shot 16 times by a cop as he walks away from officers, okay? The mayor and the police chief suppressed the tape, okay? City officials made a decision to settle with the family very quickly. But thanks to an activist and thanks to an independent journalist, this video comes out. It causes quite a stir. It ends their street protests, right? Shutting down things, shutting down shopping and these kinds of things. So what ends up happening, first of all, the mayor, Rahm Emanuel, ends up firing the guy who was the police chief when he's gone. Then there's an election, and the state's attorney, Anita Alvarez, who was seen as marching in lockstep with the police department, was ousted in an election. So the voters chose Kim Foxx, said they wanted an independent state's attorney, an independent prosecutor's office. The prosecutor and the police are two different offices. They're not one and the same. And that's part of what we need to understand. So amid all of this, then the mayor says, I'm not running for re-election. So when we do the final election today, he will not be involved. The outcome will be between two black women. So what's my point? My point is that with Kim Foxx in this whole situation, the question is about accountability, not about accountability for Jussie Smollett, because he was held accountable. He forfeited $10,000. He did community service. He's been publicly humiliated. What he was accused of in terms of a hoax is not a crime that people generally go to jail for, right? So in my view, what we need to understand is these moves to undo things that have been done. So if you can, and there have already been people, because now you got another election next year with Kim Foxx, re-election. So the thing is to get this ball rolling now, to malign her, to destroy confidence in her, so that she can be moved out. And if she moves out, if she's moved out, guess who they're gonna move right now? The same old type of relationship in person that was there before. So this is bigger than Jussie Smollett. At the end of the day, the prosecutor had the right, the prosecutor's office had the right to dispose of this case. And Ms. Fox said something in a couple interviews that I think that we really need to pay attention to. She said, just because a person is prosecuted does not mean that they are going to be found guilty. I don't think with all of the notoriety of this case, all of the attention this case got, the police chief coming out making a huge statement in the media, the police chief going on national media talking about this case and how bad it was for the city, but yet he certainly has not gone on national TV talking about the failure to solve murders in this city.
Right.
Where that murder, that record of clearance is less than 20%. So you got basically an 80% chance of getting away with a murder in the city of Chicago, but he's outraged. The police chief is outraged. The white power structure is outraged. The newspaper columnists are outraged, the white newspaper columnists. The Chicago Sun-Times and the Chicago Tribune newspapers, they're outraged. But you're not outraged about this inability of $1 billion police department to solve murders of black people in this city. Lastly, hundreds of millions of dollars, taxpayer dollars. And one study said, at the end of the day, because the city is floating bonds, well, what are they floating these bonds for? It's for construction, for redevelopment, for economic ventures? No. They're floating bonds to pay for settlements related to policemen's conduct and police wrongdoing. Hundreds of millions of dollars. One study said about it, at the end of the day, between what they pay the people, what they pay the lawyers, and what they're going to pay the investors who buy these bonds, the taxpayers in this city could be on the hook for $1 billion with a B dollars. But yet you want to talk about Jussie Smollett. So I think we really need to, as black people in this city, we need to pay attention. So there was a demonstration yesterday with folks, the police out against Kim Foxx. The other thing, remember this, the Fraternal Order of Police is not some independent group. They are the defenders, the promoters, the protectors of the police. And damn near everything that they do. Let's be clear on that. If they come out and condemn an officer, trust and believe, it takes a long time if they do it. And they're usually very tepid with their condemnation. And with their tepid condemnation, there's usually something over here praising officers as well. So we don't understand these people asserting their interests. Something is wrong with us. So that's kind of where that is. It's still unfolding. I think the other thing that I think is important is I think the state's attorney, I don't know if she's met with black media, other black media outlets, but I think she needs to have a sit down with the black media in this city and lay out her case so that we can hear it and we can report directly on what she's saying. And we can ask some questions that others are not asking. But to me, it is ridiculous. Millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, police misconduct and settlements. In this case, and you want to act like everything. I mean, some of the things, and I'm going to get off of this in a minute. But you've had the police chief and the mayor talk about a whitewash and people getting special privileges. Nobody gets more special privileges in this city than police officers. That's
right, absolutely.
Nobody. That's why the man who was ultimately convicted, the officer, of killing Laquan McDonald and shooting him 16 times, could be out in about 3 years. Out of prison. In 3 years, he could be out. 3 other officers that were there that allegedly falsified reports related to the killing of Laquan McDonald were exonerated. But I don't see the media calling them liars. I don't see the media calling them accomplices. I don't see the media calling them co-conspirators to cover up the killing of this young man. And actually, we can say now the murder, because that's the legal finding of fact now. But the court decision when it came to these 3 officers that were accused of lying to help cover their colleague, a judge decided, well, no, they're not guilty. That was the judge's right, and they want us to respect the rule of law. Well, the prosecutor had a right to decide whether or not charges would be filed in the case. So we want us to respect the law, right? And the legal system when outcomes occur that we don't like, but it's the rule of law, accept the system. But when an outcome occurs that you don't like, and if anybody was injured in this incident, it was Jussie Smollett doing something to himself, if you believe that everything they said is true. But he hasn't wavered. So again, this is a case that really, I don't think is baffling at all. I think the question is, again, for black people in Chicago, how gullible are you going to be? And I think that if you're going to be that gullible to allow these people to play politics and not allow this sister that you voted in the office for change to continue to do her job and to continue to develop policies and continue to try to get us a measure of justice out of the system, if you don't allow her to do what she started, then you get exactly whatever you get is what you deserve. And you'll be crying out again in a couple years, we need a new prosecutor. I suggest you keep the one you got and work with her to try to make sure that she lives up to the promise and she lives up to what you elected her to do.
Yes,
we need to show some intelligence and some self-determination, because certainly everybody else is doing it and they're not apologizing. So we can't be ashamed or we can't hide because the white power structure, even if they've got a black man acting on behalf of white interests as the chief, we can't be afraid to assert our interests or to assert our opinion or to assert our rights to say this is what we believe. Because during this protest yesterday, you had police officers, white police officers, saying about Laquan McDonald when they were in somewhat of a debate, if you will, with a black activist about some of these questions about police brutality and shootings and accountability, that one of the officers said, no, he shouldn't have been shot 16 times. He should have been shot 18 times. Then he said he shouldn't have been shot 18 times. He should have been shot 20 times. Then he said he shouldn't have been shot 20 times. He should have been shot 22 times. Now, these are the people you're dealing with. So you can roll with that if you want to. But I hope that we show some intelligence, and I pray that it's not your son, my daughter, your niece, my nephew in this same situation where there's been too little accountability for cops in this city and around the country. They are determined to continue to do what they do unhindered. So have it your way.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Unfortunately, as we look through the paper, we can see that our community is under attack. From, of course, the story that we opened with, the cover story, Nipsey Hussle and his murder. We see the story that you just went over with what's going on with Chicago. And even in that instance, the attack of the black woman in many aspects. But that's not the only thing. It's not only intellectual or judicial fight and attack that's going on within our community, as we see with the opening story, but in particularly on the black woman, there's a physical assault that's going on as well. Can you talk about the story that's on page 5.
Well,
who will protect her?
This is a very important story, and again, brothers and sisters, we really encourage you to subscribe to the Final Call. Get it every week. Get it every week so you can stay informed and you can consider different points of view. So we've had these different viral videos. One showed a white man in Dallas beating a black woman, pulling a weapon on her, basically stemming from a traffic or parking dispute, argument, whatever. He beats this woman, right? Then we had another video that showed a black man in New York kicking a homeless black woman, it appears, on the subway in New York, kicking her in the head and beating her. So we did a piece, Who Will Protect Her, is the headline. Viral video assaults on black women stoke anger and serious questions. And some of the questions are, wait, who's going to defend black women? And the question of bystanders standing and videotaping, but then the failures of the criminal justice system, all these things together. So go to finalcall.com, but get your copy. Very important story by Brother Jihad Muhammad. And I mean, it's almost everywhere. So get it, read it, and we say get involved before it's your wife or your daughter, because then you're going to want to need help. Well, we need to understand there's a fight going on right now, and we all got a stake in it, and we should all be involved.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Of course, on the same theme of looking at attacks and injustice, we have a few things going on, still going on, and continue to go on, and not just within the black community, but also within the Muslim community. There's 2 articles on page 11 dealing with injustice, basically, and that these families deserve justice. Hearing on the way of 4 whites charged in case of death, dismemberment of 2 young black men, and as well as the murder of Muslim teens, a life in prison.
One story is a follow-up out of Norman, Oklahoma, where you had Alizé Smith and Jerron Mourning, both 21 years old, who were killed about a year ago. They're on trial now in Oklahoma. These 2 young men, from what we have reported, had gone and it said they were trying to purchase a weapon. Somehow or another they ended up dead, shot to death. But then they would take their bodies, were taken and cut up and dismembered. I mean, so this was a really gruesome, heinous crime. The families are trying to get justice, and I mean, it's just, man, it is really sad. It's really just sad. And then we've got 2, Muslims will be celebrating Ramadan, I guess within, I don't know, almost a month, a little more than a month, which is an annual month of fasting and prayer. And about 2 years ago, we had a teenager during this holy month in Northern Virginia, Nabra Hassanin, 17 years old, was killed, sexually assaulted and killed by this man, Darwin Martinez Torres. So now that case has finally been disposed of. He's been sentenced to life in prison. I mean, again, we had the murder of 50 Muslims in New Zealand. I think we need to ask the question, what is Allah trying to tell us? What should we be learning? What should we be doing? And I think that we cannot wait until tragedy strikes to get involved. We need to all be involved now to try to avert tragedy before it happens. There's a saying which goes something like, all it takes for evil to thrive is for good people to do nothing. So the question in my mind is kind of, how good are we? What are we good for? We can do things that are good for ourselves personally, nothing wrong with that, great place to start. But our good has to be brought out into the broader society, because if we don't do that, a savage, out of control society will destroy all the other good that we're trying to do. So this is, again, reality of black life, Muslim life in America. And we want to just kind of put up a mirror to the society where we can see what's going on, and then we can make some decisions. Not just look at what's happening, but make some decisions about what's going on and how we should respond.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Well, we want to get back on a little more positive note, and the work that is being done in the community, and that even though we see all of these unpleasant things happening in our community, that there are those who will continue to stand up and do the things that we need to do to make our communities a clean and decent place to live. So we have in Akron, Ohio, Peace Talks and Conflict Resolutions in Akron, as well as a youth program that occurred in Charlotte. Can you give us a little bit more about that?
You know, the work of the Nation of Islam is the resurrection, right? The spiritual, the mental, the moral, the economic resurrection of our people, and bringing our communities up to a certain level, right? And so we are trying. And in Akron, there was a town hall meeting, and it dealt with conflict resolution and bringing peace into neighborhoods. That's a great work. That's a great work that all of our people can get involved in and work with us on. You don't have to give up your religion. You don't have to change. You don't have to be a Muslim. All you have to do is be a concerned black man and woman and want to make change, and we can work together. And so in Charlotte, North Carolina, we had a day where we kind of had the young people show their gifts and talents. Any movement that does not have young people is a movement that will not be able to survive. So they were able to speak. Sister Kenya Muhammad, a student youth minister from Mosque Mariam in Chicago, that we see almost every week here, was the keynote speaker in Charlotte. So if we're training for leadership, and if we want to attract other young people, we got to put young people out, give them the opportunity to show what they can do, so they can inspire other young people to get involved and to look at what we're offering as a way to change their lives and again change the society. Both very good stories, and that's why you should read The Final Call, because you need to hear something about what you can do, not just what's happening to you, but what you can do to change the world around you, as opposed to crying, woe is me, there's no hope. No, there's plenty of hope. Just get into the game, get into the fight, and you'll feel a little better.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, I'm going to open it to you. Of course, as we always know, there's plenty of articles, plenty of information that people need to be aware of, and they need to, of course, subscribe to the Final Call newspaper in whatever form you desire. I like personally, you know, you like the paper. I like having the physical paper, but there's so many benefits. I like today, I had the article read to me while I was doing something else. So I like being able to do that type of thing. Had an article read to me.
I'm not going to call you lazy. It's okay. I mean, that's your choice.
Multitasking.
That's your choice.
But at the same time, it's good sometimes to have a paper there. But I got to do a quick plug. You know, for those who may be getting a little older, or their vision isn't as good, you can have it right there within the digital edition. You can zoom in on the text, you know, so if you still want to read it, you can have the text a lot bigger than this. I mean, but there are benefits, of course, benefits on both sides, but the most important thing is that you get a paper on a weekly basis so that you don't miss what's going on in the paper.
Absolutely. You know, self-determination. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad, one of the fundamental things that he taught is we must do something for ourselves. So it is not optional. It is not a good idea. It is imperative that we do something for ourselves. And I think that what we've seen, and this is the 40th anniversary year of the Final Call, so we know when the minister started to rebuild the nation around 1977, I mean, imagine that. That's over 40 years, in addition to 20-some years before that. My contention is all we've seen over the last 40 years is that you better be doing something for yourself. Trump ain't giving you nothing. Even those who don't like Trump don't necessarily like you. So you will have politicians talk about the need for more representation of women and meeting the interests of women, but they're really talking about white women. But you won't hear them say we need more black representation. You won't hear them say there's no talk of an urban plan. There's nothing directed at us. And even though many have, or a few of the national presidential candidates have come out, quote unquote, in favor of reparations, some of them want to tie it to poverty. They still want to avoid this issue of race. So if you're not doing something for yourself in this climate, in this day, racial attacks off the chart, the leader of the country, absolutely racist. The leader of this country, a man that killed 50 people now, 50 Muslims, just because they were Muslims. And this white man in New Zealand killed 50 people because he sees himself as a race warrior, and he sees the presence of Muslims in Europe as an attack on the white race. So he kills 50 people, injures about another 50. You know who he claims as his ally in the broader struggle to preserve white people and protect white people is Donald Trump. So again, we can continue to ignore reality, or we can face up to it and do something for ourselves. So hopefully what the paper offers is something for you to think about, some information, some perspectives for you to consider. We got a piece in here by Dr. Conrad Worrell about reparations and Pan-Africanism, and we will be dealing with that subject again soon, perhaps next week or the following week. That's why you got to stay tuned. So, I mean, again, this is a very dangerous time in this country. And I think it should be clear to us that we need to come together and we need to protect our own interests. Nobody else is going to do it for us.
Yes, sir. And another question that I've been adding in, which I think you kind of begin to allude to it, of course, as we didn't expect the murder of our brother Nipsey Hussle to occur, that probably made some adjustments to the paper, because of course the final call wants to always be tied to what's going on. But can you give us any sneak peeks on what we may find in the next edition of the paper?
No. Okay. Stay tuned. Like I said, look for some coverage about reparations. Look for some coverage about what's happening with rich people, why they're getting richer and why you're getting poorer. And stay tuned to some other things that we got going.
Okay. Thank you. So anything else before we close out on the words from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan? And I have to throw mine in here. Before we close out, I want to close out with his words. But really looking at that, some would argue and say that our brother's murder is just an example of why we shouldn't do anything. And that as we do and attempt to do things for the liberation of our people, that we see what happens. And I think that it's important that we take the exact opposite position, and just shows that we have to stand up and be stronger, and we have to take even a more active role in making sure that when we have these soldiers like this, that we don't just look at them and glorifying what they do, but play a more active role in supporting. Yeah. So sometimes we find ourselves having a misunderstanding of leadership. Yeah. And that we think that the role of leaders is that they do the work and we sit back and watch and applaud them. That we have to become more of a community and see that we look at the leader and we see what they're doing, and we run fast, or attempt to run faster, and we attempt to see a good work that's being done, that we magnify that.
You know, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has said that Almighty God Allah imposes on every living creature, right, the obligation to do something for itself. So to stand by and watch somebody else do something while you do nothing shows that you're either asleep or you're dead. Not physically, but mentally, spiritually, morally. Your consciousness is not awakened. Because if your consciousness is awakened, you understand that in order for life to change, I've got to do something. I've got to contribute to something. I've got to join something, right? And so our hope is, again, that we will continue to learn, that this work we're doing will continue to expand, because certainly it is a challenging work. But to do nothing basically says, well, we'll just die. We'll just be overrun. We'll just be overcome. We just won't struggle. But that's not our history. There are people who come from struggle. And I would say it's not even natural. You got to struggle to come into the world, to live, right? You got to struggle, or the sperm in the billions of sperm during the act of procreation have to struggle and fight to be the one to reach the egg. So what were your odds of making it? Because each of those sperms are different, unique. So you made it here. You've already overcome the biggest odds you will ever see in your life. So now that we're here, what are we going to do? And I think with what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad offers in terms of knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, I think the work of Minister Farrakhan for the last 60 years, the last 40-something years in the absence of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the work of the nation and others are inspiring. Imperfect, but inspiring. Well, why are they imperfect? They're imperfect because you're not here. And if you were to come join, and you were to bring your missing piece of that puzzle, your skill, your talent, your connections, your brilliance, your way of looking at the world, and your commitment, we can perfect this movement and move our people forward. But I would just close with this. I've been in the nation 33 some years, 33 odd years now. I'm glad that I heard a word and believed. And I thank Allah almost every day, literally, for having spent my life in this cause, having started as a younger man, and not having wasted my time. Because you don't know how much time you got, and however much time you got, it ain't enough. And if you doubt that, see all the things that people do to try to stay here when it's time for them to leave physically. So let's be inspired, man. Let's learn, let's get involved, and we will continue to try to spread light and spread truth and awaken our sleeping people to the reality of who they are, the time, and what must be done.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And before, if you don't mind reading the minister's statement, is another important note for those who don't have, this is something that you wouldn't necessarily see like this if you don't have a physical copy, but something that doesn't typically happen is that we actually have you
won't see this like this.
We don't. We don't typically have a center picture of the ministers, where the minister's article usually appears is actually a picture of our brother Nipsey Hussle.
I mean, look. I mean, there's just something. Look at. I mean, this is almost. I mean, not almost. This is suitable for framing. But we'll close with the minister's words. This is Minister Louis Farrakhan, National Representative of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, below is a brief statement from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan on the passing of the gifted artist, entrepreneur, and community leader Nipsey Hussle, who was born Ermias Asghedom, lived in and worked to build the Crenshaw Crenshaw section of Los Angeles, and who departed this life on March 31st, 2019. This is the minister's statement. We are gathering as much information as we can on the passing of our brother Nipsey Hussle. But the Nation of Islam mourns the loss of this great brother. His death, as well as his life, has so much meaning to it for us and for unborn generations. We thank Allah that his life came this way from God and touched our lives. I would advise the community not to react to rumors and false information to make us in our time of grief or sadness turn on one another. This is a statement from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, a brief statement on the passing of Nipsey Hussle. Again, from that statement, a bigger hand than the hand of the man who pulled the trigger is behind it all. More, I will say, in the future. To his family, to those who love him and have been affected positively by him, we offer to all peace. The peace that we offer is the gift of God, to those who submit their will to do his will. Best wishes to the family and to all the friends. Louis Farrakhan, National Representative of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Lost Found Nation of Islam in the West. You can see the statement online and it looks good, but what a beautiful presentation in the physical print edition of the paper. You need to get your copy.
Yes, sir.
You need to get your copy.
Thank you, thank you, thank you once again. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum. Peace be unto you.